What is going on, my fellow geeks?
3 movies with elves and a guy with a white beard.
Not a lot of people accept it as canon.
2022 will be the year of Star Wars.
Well, I have more than just one piece of geek news.
I have been Isaac Hunter.
Which is like high culture, but better.
Hello, fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks, the weekly pop culture podcast where we talk about all things geeky and geek culture, which is like high culture, but better. My name is Hope Gooderl, host of the Raving Geeks podcast, along with my co-host who will introduce himself in a minute with our question of the week. If you're just joining us for the first time and you like this episode and want to check out other episodes, you can find us at cm-life.com and any other place you listen to podcasts like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Just search Central Michigan Life Podcasts, Raving Geeks. So if you're watching us from YouTube and you realize that it's still March, we're geeks. So of course we have to talk about March is reading month and books. So our question of the week this week is, Carter, what is your current read?
Hey guys. My current read is Alice in Wonderland for school, actually. But for fun reading, my current read is I'm currently really invested in the old EC comics from Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. My brother just got me a couple for Christmas, so I'm going through those right now. How about you, Hope?
Nice. I am currently reading Shadow and Bone, the first book of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the Grisha First trilogy. Yes, I was that person who started watching the show before I started reading the books, but I'm also going back and forth and saying, oh, I like what the show did versus how it's in the book, or oh, maybe they should have done that in the show, instead of books, but also knowing that shows have creative liberties, and I'm just enjoying reading for fun.
Mhm.
So I'm also reading Alice in Wonderland, or I should be, but I kind of want to read Shadow and Bone first.
That's fair.
So on to our geek news of the week. Carter, what you got for us?
I'm gonna start off with some bad news, which is Disney halts everything not Star Wars related to focus on Star Wars. So that means that they unfortunately canceled the Indiana Jones Disney Plus series that they had in the works, which is very sad and disappointing. But the new Ghostbusters sequel just added Kumail Nanjiani. Is that how you say his name?
I think so.
Kumail Nanjiani and Patton Oswalt to their cast, which is very exciting. I'm excited to see what their placement in the Ghostbusters universe is. The John Wick spinoff, The Continental, just had some new details released. There will be 3 90-minute episodes, and it'll hit Peacock in September. And it'll be all about Winston, the head of the Continental, and he'll be played by Penn Badgley from You. So that's really good casting, and I'm excited to see what they do with that. They said that Vincent D'Onofrio on the Daredevil set said that season 2 is already planned, which is really exciting. And Ryan Coogler has decided to revive the X-Files with a new and diverse cast. That's really exciting. I always really enjoyed the X-Files, and I'm excited to see his take on it. The Batman 2 just got one of its villains confirmed, which is going to be Clayface, which is very exciting. No, Matt Reeves said he wasn't going to do any mystical Batman villains, and yet Clayface is one of the most mystical villains in Batman. So I'm curious to see how they're going to do his character. They also said that Mike Flanagan pitched a horror movie about him. So I would be really interested to see that. And to cap off my news, Laura Harrier, I think that's how you say her name. But she played Liz in Spider-Man Homecoming, or Spider-Man's first girlfriend, and she will be playing a younger version of Ahsoka Tano for the Ahsoka show. I think that's great casting, actually. And the comparison photos that people have been putting up, they look very similar. So I'm really excited to see what Dave Filoni's got for that. Hope, what's your geek news?
Well, I'm gonna go with your Penn Badgley, I think that's his name.
Penn
He was
Badgley.
with with You, You has been renewed for a fifth and final season. I'll be honest, the show has never interested me. It actually kind of annoyed me with how they, at least originally, advertised it, so I never watched it. So I'm kind of happy that it's ending, but I do know other people um like the show, so I apologize to all those of you who are geeking out about the fact that you get another season, but then you're sad because it's the last one. Speaking of last season's, Outlander has officially got a start date for their final season. Um, June 16th is when the final season on Stars starts. Um, we've got news from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is that final runtime is reportedly 2.5 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
So not the longest movie, but definitely long. They're really pushing their limits here.
It's the longest one in the trilogy, I'm pretty sure.
Think so? Sounds about right. Um, Keeping in the Marvel universe, but also branching out a bit, Jeff Goldblum has confirmed that he is joining Wicked as the Wizard. Which I am super excited about because he's eccentric and the Wizard is the Wizard. There's a lot that could be said about the Wizard and Wicked, but I will not ruin that for anybody. Secret Invasion is coming to Disney Plus on June 21st.
Oh yeah,
And
I forgot about that. That's really
yeah,
exciting.
and it'll consist of 6 episodes, which is on par for Marvel's Disney Plus shows. So the next Descendants movie, which is The Rise of Red, which is not following the original four um villain kids, Mal, Evie, Carlos, and Jay. It's not following them, but it's following like the announcement of Mal and Ben's, I think it's like their either baby announcement or like baby christening or something like that. But we have a casting announcement for Cinderella and Prince Charming. Brandy and Paolo Montalban from the Rodgers and Hammerstein version of Cinderella with Whoopi Goldberg and Whitney Houston. Um, they are going to be reprising Cinderella and Prince Charming, which to me just adds to the casting because we already have Chad from the original three Descendants movies, who was Cinderella's son. He is white. But if you go with the casting from the Rodgers and Hammerstein version, um, Whoopi Goldberg and then the guy who played Firestorm, he was also in Legally Blonde. First Legally Blonde as the professor. They had the Asian kid who was played by Paolo Montalban. And then, of course, then you have Brandy, who is black, and so, it comes back together, and they have a white kid, which at the same time, I just love the fantastic casting of it, of just not caring. Because I think it also shows that, like, we care more about, like, geekiness of everything, and relating back to things that have been done really well than, like, trying to change anything. Um, so apparently in the Disney world, we are getting a live action, um, Aristocats movie. And Questlove, who just won an Oscar win for his documentary Summer of Soul, is going to be directing the Aristocats, the live action remake. It's billed as live action hybrid reimagining, so probably similar to like The Lady and the Tramp and The Lion King. So it'll mix CGI animals with live human actors. And then Will Gluck from Peter Rabbit and Keith Boonen from Onward are writing the script for the Aristocats live action. And then just to finish out, for CMU geekiness, our kicker Marshall Meter has announced that he plans to enter the transfer portal for his remaining 2 years of eligibility. So we just want to wish him the best of luck. I hope that he ends up at a really good school and it propels him forward in whatever career that he wants, whether that is continuing in football professionally or whatever. We hope the best for him. So, that is all our news for the week. So, on to our geek topic. As it is the final week of March and March is reading month, we wanted to geek out on books and specifically our favorite books. But of course, being geeks, we had to narrow it down because our list probably would take multiple episodes, and even then would not be complete. So we kept it down to 3 books, and Carter, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming that your thinking is the same as mine, where your top 3 changes constantly based on what you're reading. Like you might have some that stay in your top 3 or top 5, but it's gonna change. Um, so like my top 3 this week, or for this episode that I chose for this episode, I made sure not to pick any in a series. Um, that way, if anyone wants to read it, you don't have to slog through an entire series just to get to a specific one.
Mhm.
Um, and or if it was part of a series, it was the first one. Um, but yeah, mine changed constantly, literally based on if how much I loved the book or hated it. Um, Carter, is that your feeling for your top 3 as well?
I mean, yeah, they do change constantly. Just by looking at my bookshelf, I'm like, nah, I like that one a little bit better. Well, that'll make a one go may up or down, you know?
Yeah. So, do not hold any of our choices against us. Just putting that out there. But so we're gonna start at the bottom of our list with number 3. Carter, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is a Stephen King short story collection. It's called Night Shift. It is the first Stephen King book I ever read, and it really thrusted me into like the horror literature genre. Um, and Night Shift is actually really funny because not a whole lot of people like know it, but like the stories in it. So the stories in Night Shift are like Graveyard Shift with the giant rats, Children of the Corn, the Lawnmower Man, The Boogeyman, which is a movie coming out this June. So there's all these great works of Stephen King that have already been adapted. It's just that people don't talk about where they came from. There's also some really great stories like Jerusalem's Lot, The Mangler, and I Am the Doorway, which haven't got adaptations yet, especially I Am the Doorway. I would love to see that one. It's about a man who gets psychic visions of other people's deaths, and after each death, an eyeball appears on his skin. It's really, really cool and trippy. I love that story so much.
I feel bad for the man, especially as people know what his abilities are, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just like an eyeball appearing. They'd be like, "Oh, yep, it came true, didn't it?"
Yeah. Yeah,
But just
but it's a
knowing.
great story, and I love all the stories in that. And I remember specifically picking up that book from the library in my high school and just blasting through that thing in a week. It was so good.
Yeah, short books that are collections of short stories are really nice. And like I'll say there's a book called Grimm and it's by a variety of authors. And it's retellings of all the Grimm fairy tales. And like it's so nice because you can just jump around, like you don't have to read straight through if you don't want to. And you can just like skip to what's your favorite Grimm fairy tale first, or what title sounds interesting to you. It's
Hmm.
not like a regular chapter book.
Hmm.
My number 3 is a book called We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. It's about 14 teens who have grown up together in Japantown, San Francisco, and then get thrust into um Japanese incarceration camps during World War II. and get moved around, and like some of them get to stay together, some of them don't, but I really like it because it shows multiple viewpoints.
Hmm.
Um, but also like that's partly why it's number three, because even though it does show viewpoints, it changes every chapter.
Hmm.
But all the chapters are really good about staying consistent within the storyline and like timeline.
Hmm.
So it's not like you're just jumping around from time and place and everything. Like it's consistent. Um it's just like who's telling the story changes, so that can get confusing. Um but because it does jump around a bit, some of the voices of the characters get a little boring at times, so I've had a little bit of trouble getting through it, even though it's really interesting and really good to like actually know, because the camps here in the United States are not talked about enough. And it also brings up the fact that like there was the division between Koreans and Japanese as well. Because there's at least one point where like one of the kids, he either is about to get beat up or like almost beat up by white people, because racism is very prevalent at this time. Um, and he wishes that he had whatever way of saying that he's Korean instead of Japanese, but he can't, and the Koreans aren't going to help him because they don't want to get hurt or anything. And but then also like losing all of their stuff because they can only pack up so much of their belongings. Um, so it is difficult in a couple different ways, but it's also a really important read and really good read as well.
That sounds very good.
Yes. I actually started reading it because um I was thinking about using it for a lesson plan.
Hmm.
And then I realized that the changing viewpoints, because I was trying to write it for English as a second language lesson plan, um, that the changing viewpoints might confuse English learners a little bit. Like the
Hmm.
story might connect to some, but the changing viewpoints might not be the best. So I went with a different book. Um, that made it onto my honorary mentions list, but did not make it onto my top three, at least for this week. All right. Number two, what you got for us?
My number two is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. It's a great, great book about two girls who go away on a summer vacation before the school year starts with their friends, and they go to this lake house. And while exploring the beach area, they come across like this abandoned cave that supposedly where devil worshippers had a ceremony at, and they have an encounter with a demon, and it ends up possessing her friend. And the entire book is about her trying to exorcise her friend from the demon that possessed her. It's a great book. Um, it's one of the few books that made me cry. A horror book, and it's like really cheesy, schlocky horror that made me cry. Um, it's such a unique book because Grady Hendrix was a huge fan of like 80s horror. So much so he made a playlist that you're supposed to listen to while reading the book. It's one of the greatest experiences I've ever read. It felt like I was watching a movie through reading a book. It just helped immerse me into the world that he was building. It's very funny. It's really scary. It's basically one big love letter to movies like The Exorcist and The Omen. And I really, really enjoyed that book. It wasn't an experience I've ever really had before. And yeah, that's why it's my number two.
Nice. I feel like more authors should make playlists for their books,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not like you have to listen to it while you're reading. Like, no, this is what, like they mentioned that their one character has their headphones in all the time.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, like when I'm script writing, I like okay, this song's gonna go here, this song's gonna be referenced here, this is gonna be referenced here. It's really,
Yeah.
really it helps like build character.
Yeah. And like, I want to know what the person is listening to. What's their playlist? What's their go-to playlist? Or, um, their play, like if they're a painter, that they have to listen to specific music or a specific playlist.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more authors should do that, or at least if they do, then give it to the readers, because some of us want that a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
because we get into books a lot more. Yeah, I I find it very interesting so far. I realize I haven't said my second one yet, but so far we each have themes for our our topics.
Mm-hmm.
Because my number two is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. So this one is actually Angie Thomas's, I think it's the second one she published, second or third. I don't remember if it came before or after on the come up. Um, excuse me, but it's actually the prequel to The Hate You Give. It talks about Maverick, who is Star Carter's father, and him growing up in the same city that The Hate You Give is set in. It's about how Maverick has to deal with Seven, who's Star's older brother, half brother, and then eventually how the fact that Maverick has two kids that are roughly the same age. um, but it also deals with like the oppression that comes with living in a low income area and why gang life is important. Like it doesn't she's not saying, "Oh, you should go join a gang and sell drugs." That's not what she's saying, but she shows like why some people might be led to that life and feel like that's the only life they can lead.
Mm-hmm.
And she shows that through Maverick really well. Um, and the other big difference between Concrete Rose and The Hate You Give is The Hate You Give, she wrote in response to all of her white classmates in college at her liberal arts school asking her thoughts about police shootings of unarmed Black Americans. And Concrete Rose is more like she wrote it for her, it feels like, more than in a response to anything. And you can definitely see that when you read them side by side or like one after the other. You can just tell the style of writing is different. How she's writing about it, everything is different. And it's in a good way too. Like both books are phenomenal. Um, but Concrete Rose, I feel like would give a lot of people a lot more culture shock than The Hate You Give, because she does not hold anything back or try to sugarcoat anything like in The Hate You Give. Um, and like I think it's really a strong book um that she wrote and that I absolutely love it. So going back to my comment on we have themes so far. Carter's theme so far is in the genre of horror, and mine so far has been in the genre of diverse characters and dealing with oppression and racism, discrimination. So I find that just kind of funny that we both have kind of themes so far.
Yeah.
Even my top one doesn't quite fit the same way in the theme, but it does. Um, but before we get to our number one, we of course have to do our honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
So, Carter, what's your first honorable mention that you got for us? What
Uh,
didn't
it,
make the top three?
it is Stephen King's The Shining. I love that book. I think it's the second Stephen King book I ever read. And, I think the book is personally better than the movie. I am one of those people. It's just a really well written book. I love the entire dynamic of the Torrance family, and I love how in depth it goes into like the lore of the hotel and what exactly happened for it to be haunted. And I love like all the experiences with Danny, and I think that it's just a really well written book. How about you?
Yes. Mine, continuing in my theme, is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. So I absolutely love that it's written in prose. This was the book that I actually chose for my um lesson plan instead of We Are Not Free because it's prose, but it's the same voice and character the whole way through, even though others are introduced. Um, but the one thing that bothers me is the ending is ambiguous.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to try and say too much to like spoil it for anyone, but like in some ways it does clear up some of the questions that he was posing at the beginning of the novel. Um because it's about this kid. He found his brother's handgun because his brother was in a gang. And part of the rules of the hood are you get revenge.
Mhm.
Um, and so he is taking the elevator down in his apartment building to go get revenge on the guy that he thinks um killed his brother. And each floor a ghost comes into the elevator, and like you kind of have this, well, here's someone who was part of the gang, or here's someone who was affected by um gang shootings, or all these different things. And so you can see this kid start to um start thinking about what he's doing or what he's planning on doing, but there's no like, it just kind of ends with like, oh, are you coming? What does that
Mhm.
mean? So, and because it's the ghosts asking, I'm just like, is this kid now dead? Like, was there an elevator crash that we don't know about? Um, but it just, like, it's ambiguous. You don't get a clear, precise ending. Um, which, it's kind of nice because you can like decide for yourself what this kid actually does, if he learns his lesson, whatever. Or you could just get frustrated with not knowing his answer.
Mhm.
So that is why it did not make my top three, just because it kind of frustrates me a little bit. It is a phenomenal book.
Mhm.
Um, Absolutely phenomenal, written in prose, so it's easier to read than a traditional novel. Um, but yeah, it just kind of frustrates me a little bit. So
Mhm.
yeah. What's another honorable mention?
I mean, I would put all Stephen King books on honorable mentions. He's just that fucking good. But a non-Stephen King book that I would put is definitely Art of Racing in the Rain. I forget who it's by. Hold on. Let me fact check myself before I make a mistake. But
That one
it's
got turned into a movie with
I don't talk about the movie.
but it has what's his name?
It's Kevin Costner who's in it.
No, Jess from Gilmore Girls,
Does
or
it?
from This Is Us. He was the dad. Oh my God, he was also on Heroes. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't remember.
Milo. I'm gonna get the last name wrong because there are multiple Milo actors. Okay, Milo Ventimiglia was the main character. Also, Amanda Seyfried is in the movie as well.
Yeah. So the book is by Garth Steen. I don't know any of his other works, but this is a great book that my mom read before. And she was just like, here, you read this book and tell me what you think of it. Another book that has made me cry. The only reason it's not on my top three is because I haven't read it in a very long time. And I remember most parts well, other parts not so much. But that ending is really, really impactful. Like I read that ending and could not stop crying. That book is so damn well written. It's really a marvel how you can take the perspective of a dog and make a book out of it. I think that's so impressive. And to make it so emotionally packed is also
Oh
amazing to
yeah.
me. The only reason it's not on the top three is because I haven't read it in like 8 years. 8.5, 9, somewhere around there. It's been quite a while, but
Yeah.
if I had read it recently, it would definitely be on my top 3.
My city, my hometown. I remember. I don't remember when. It was a while ago. Um, Pre-college. I know that, but don't ask me about time because ADHD and time do not mix. Um, but I remember my library did a community reads at like book club with Art of Dancing in the Rain. And I just remember I was like, oh, there's a dog on it. So I want it. And then like reading, I was like, is it like I didn't actually read it. Um, but I but like reading the back, I was like, this isn't about a dog. This isn't it. Like it is, but it's not. So I
Yeah,
didn't end up
it's
reading it.
more about his owners, but it's
Yeah.
through the perspective of the dog.
Yes.
It's very much a family drama.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very
Hmm.
much so.
But great book. Very great book.
Yes. So my next honorable mention is called Legend by Marie Lu. Um, this book was phenomenal. I wrote a review about it on my website that I have for book reviews. Um, there was like a Robin Hood aspect for one of the characters that he, stealing from the rich and trying to help the poor. And then the rich princess aspect of the other character. Um, so of course then you also get their relationship once they meet. Um, but this one did it is part of a series, but it's the first of a series. But it did not make my top list because it was one of those books that I sat there going, it has to get better. There has to be action at some point, has to get going. And it took about halfway through the book
Mm,
before I was finally like, okay, here's the action. Like,
okay.
I was sitting there going, turn the page, keep reading, turn the page. And then halfway through, I was like, okay, now I can't put it down. So, like, it's a really good book,
Hmm.
but the setup just took too long, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't read the second one yet of the series. I think it got packed away at some point, and so I got to figure out which box of books it's in. And
Hmm.
yes, which box because I have lots. Because they are partially going into my classroom library eventually. Um, but this it was like the descriptions and everything, the storylines. Like I say, it was Robin Hood and then Rich Princess, but it wasn't the cliche type either. Like I mean, some people might find it cliche, but it was very well written, like using old themes and old stories, but revamping them.
Hmm.
Um, and it was honestly, I was really happy once I could like that I kept reading it.
Yeah.
Because I really, it was, yeah, it just didn't make it because I did not enjoy the first half of the book with how slow
Yeah,
it was.
that's fair. Hmm.
We're gonna do one final honorable mention why I could not remember what that was because I literally just said it like 2 minutes ago. Um, and then we also want to tell you guys because sometimes geeks need to rant about things that are not good, and some books they might deserve to be read or written by some people. Some people might enjoy them, but they're not the best. So we want to give you guys warnings about them. So Carter, before we give warnings on books, what is your final honorable mention of the night?
It's all 4 Lord of the Rings books: The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. The only reason that they're not on here is because it is a lot. It is a lot of lore. It is a lot to understand, and I get why people don't dig Lord of the Rings. But I watched the movies and then read the books, and I love both. So that's why it is not on the top 3, though. Also, if I had to pick one, it'd probably be either The Hobbit or Return of the King. I love both those books, though. Oh, Fellowship is also good. Yeah, see, it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing battle.
they're in their own top three for you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Whereas I'm just like, they could stay over there and not come anywhere near me and we'll be fine.
Mhm.
They're not ones that I got into at all.
Yeah, it's a lot. I can understand why you didn't.
Well, it's more, and it's probably because I saw the movies first. Um, but so we watched the movies on our way down in high school, to Atlanta, Georgia on a bus ride for a band trip.
Hmm.
And I fell asleep. I woke up, or no, okay, so when I fell asleep, they were traveling. When I woke up, they were still traveling. I fell asleep and then I woke back up. It was a different movie, but they were still traveling. I was just like, oh my gosh, you could condense this down.
Hmm.
But if anybody is a frequent listener, you know that I've had this argument with Isaac before too, where he says it's about the journey, not the destination. So, like, those books, I totally understand that there are some people that really absolutely love them. They are not my cup of tea because I need fast-paced books. Um, my final honorable mention is the book called Prince Charming, by Rachel Hawkins. It is very definitely a young adult teen, um, kind of, um, kind of teen romance, but not really. Like there is teen romance in it, um, but it's more like, um, because they have to be set up. Like so it's about a girl, her sister is engaged to the fictional Scottish royal family.
Hmm.
One of the sons in there. And her younger sister has absolutely no care in the world for like being in the spotlight or anything. But then when she goes to meet the Scottish royal family, the press is all like, "Oh, she's interested in this other, you know, the other prince." And so the Queen of Scotland is like, "No, you're gonna start dating the best friend, and that's gonna be your narrative." Um, and so like she's very against it. Daisy is very against it, and I absolutely loved that too, because she was just like she's fighting it this entire time, trying to tell her truth. But of course, as it is with tabloids and paparazzi, they do not care. They just want money. And the biggest, most scandalous headline and picture sells, it gets them money. Um, but she eventually does start to become friends with the guy that she set up with, um, and like starts to understand how her sister feels and about it and the new life, um and it is part of a it's like a duology, I think. But the second book, you don't have to have read this book. Like it's just the characters overlap, but it's not the same storyline, like continuation type thing.
Hmm.
So I also like that part of it, but it did not make my top three. Mainly because it is very definitely one that I just sat and read on my phone in the span of about an hour, I
Hmm.
think, on my Kindle app. It was at the beginning of the pandemic that I read it. It's a great book, but it's one that I might recommend to my students in the future, some of my students, but it's not necessarily something that I'd say everyone has to read.
Hmm.
So that's why it's an honorable mention. Um, so now on to our warnings for books. So, Carter, is there a book that you have had to abandon or you pushed yourself to finish it and just were very disappointed in it?
Yes. As a Stephen King fan, I'm very ashamed to say that I've never finished it. I can't do it. there's only so many paragraphs I can read about Stephen King describing a red balloon. So I know it's sacrilegious. I haven't read all of it, but I've seen the 3.5 hour cut of the 1990s TV movie, and I've seen both movies. So I think I know the plot pretty well. Yeah, I just can't get through it. That thing is longer than the Bible. So
That's
yeah,
fair.
I can't do it. I've tried 3 separate times. I even bought a copy of it to like force myself. Okay, I spent my own money. I need to read it. Nah, I couldn't do it. I just put that on the shelf. I'm like, nah. I'm gonna go back to different seasons or another short story collection.
Yep.
Mhm.
That sounds accurate. Um, so the one that I have, it's called Finding My Voice by Marie. Oh gosh, I'm gonna mispronounce her Mayung Oak or Okay Lee. Um, it's a relatively short novel. It's just under 200 pages. Um, I originally was interested in it because I get emails from this company called BookBub, which goes through and compiles. So, like, if you say that you buy books on Amazon, like Kindle books, and then you say like what your favorite genres are, or like favorite authors, and it'll give you deals. So sometimes you can get books for free or 99 cents, and these all are Kindle books. But so the book blurb was very intriguing. It was like, okay, it's gonna be a little cliche, but like it's intriguing. And then I started reading it and I was like, this book has to get better. It has to get better. Like I'm just gonna continue to read it because it has to get better at some point. Like it's gonna get better. It never got better. The
Mhm.
book is called Finding My Voice. The main character never finds her voice. She literally runs away from her problems and never returns.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, I was so annoyed. And I don't know if it's because um the main character in the book is the same name as the author or like similar name, and so I don't know if it's the author writing a fictionalized version of her life as a kid because it's also set in like the 90s or something, I think, because she uses a payphone um and actually uses a taxi in like rural, it's either Wisconsin or Minnesota. I don't remember which. Um, oh my gosh. But it was awful. It did
Mhm.
not get better. It did not match the title. Um, the book blurb was a complete lie. It just it was disappointing. And
Mhm.
I'm so glad that I got it from my library instead of buying it anywhere to read it first so that I knew not to buy it.
Mhm.
Um, and like even on the cover, it says a quintessential teen book about trying to navigate high school and find some semblance of belonging. The head is more accurate than the book blurb, but it was still did not quite follow that at all either. So I don't know what book these reviewers were reading,
Mhm.
but I don't think we read the same book.
Yep.
Um, what a what's another warning you've got for us?
There aren't too many. See, I was very picky about books when I was a kid. So I don't really have too many. The other one I would really say would be Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. The first half of short stories are good. The second half are absolute trash. And it was actually that book actually got me into writing because I was reading it during the pandemic and I read one of the stories that were so unbelievably trash. I don't even remember the name of it, but I was like, you know what? I can write a better story than this dude. That was so terrible. I'm gonna write a better story. And I did. And that's how I really got into writing. So I can't really say I don't recommend that book because it's kind of the whole reason why I'm here at CMU. But yeah, the second half of those stories was not that great. But the one short story that stood out was The Jaunt, and that was all about how teleportation travel would actually be like if it actually existed in the 20th century at that point, because it was written in 1987, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it was definitely one of his earlier short story collections. But that story haunted me. The ending to that one is nuts. It's a great H.P. Lovecraft inspired Stephen King story. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I will say I was very picky as a child as well. So the books that like I don't like as much are recent, like pandemic started, because that's when I
Yeah.
started my website for book reviews, which I also started as a way to like compile lists of books for my future students to be able to just like go and check out the website and read different reviews. Um, but so about 3 months into the pandemic, because I posted this one on June 30th in 2020, I actually abandoned a book, which is surprising, and that took a lot for me to do because I've never abandoned a book before. Um, sorry, my ghost decided to appear and knock over an empty water bottle. Um, but I abandoned this book about halfway through, because it did not like talk about it just kind of like talked around the issue of what created the book. So like there was something that happened before the book starts. They don't tell you what it is. And then they just kind of like dance around what it is, not actually like telling you what happened. Um and so and then like she also changed point of view. Like the author changed point of view, or I should probably tell you what the book name is. It's called My Name is Venus Black, by Heather Lloyd. Um, the like inciting incident, you can kind of guess what happened, but you also want confirmation to know if your guess is correct or not.
Right.
Um, and so I don't know if I would have gotten that like later on in the book if I had continued reading, but there was not like much dialogue in it. And when it didn't start dialogue really until about halfway through the book. Um, when she started like having, because she changed point of views some chapters, but like didn't tell you that she changed point of views. So like all of a sudden you're reading, you're like, wait, this doesn't match. Oh, we're in a different character. That's why. Okay. Um, it was nice that like the author wrote where it's set and what year, but you also need to know who's talking. And if you're writing in first person and then you switch point of views and don't tell the person that you switched, it's very difficult and it takes you out of the book. Because you're trying to figure out what's happening. Um and so like I started skipping paragraphs because there was just so much exposition that was unnecessary and didn't actually tell me about the book. But yeah. So that was the first ever book I've abandoned. And I probably should have abandoned Finding My Voice, but I didn't because I was convinced it would get better. And it did not. So
Got it.
but now back to our happy books. We'll finally tell you, after building up the suspense, our number ones for our top 3 favorite books. So Carter, does your number one keep with your theme of horror?
Oh, you know it does.
What's your number one?
Every Stephen King fan is going to be mad at me for me saying this, but Cycle the Werewolf is my favorite book of all time. Stephen King's Cycle the Werewolf. Every Stephen King fan is like, oh God, he didn't say Misery or The Stand. He chose Psycho, the picture book made for adults. Yes, because the illustrations are very good, and it's based off of my favorite werewolf movie. Well, it was the Cycle of the Werewolf was a book that came out in 1981. And I think a few years later, in 1985, 1986, is when Stephen King decided to make Silver Bullet, which was based off of that book. And that's one of my favorite movies of all time. Ever since my mom showed me it, that was kind of my gateway into schlocky horror, because in that movie, the werewolf grab pushes a man down, grabs the man's bat, breaks it in two, and uses the big barrel part of it to beat the man to death. Might I remind you, he is a wolf man. So it is just stuff like that. And it's really remarkable because that movie is probably the best book adaptation I've ever seen, because it takes every scene in Cycle of the Werewolf and adapts it to the screen. There are only two scenes that are missing, and one of them is based on Halloween. So in the book, it's all about the monthly rotation of the werewolf. In the movie, it's about the weekly rotation of the werewolf. So they couldn't fit on all the holidays that are featured in the book. But nonetheless, it's still basically a perfect adaptation. And I love that book so much.
I'll be honest and say that I forget that Stephen King is a prolific writer and has published a crap ton of books.
Yeah, I think it's 70 right now. He's got a new one coming out this year.
I know he's an author, but he's not someone that I read because I'm not super into horror. Um, my imagination is way too wild, and then having cats in the dark is
Mhm.
not a good combination. Um, so but it's also just something that I'm not the biggest fan of necessarily. But knowing how many books he has shows to like how big his fan base is,
Mhm.
slash how much publishers are just willing to publish it, because they're like, well, it's most likely going to make money because there's someone out there who wants it, and we got to make sure that it's there. Plus the fact that he's had the TV or movie adaptations means that the publishers might get some kickback from that, because, oh, hey, it's also a book, let me go read the book. um so speaking of, let me go read the book because it's based on a book.
Mhm.
My number one, Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. Um, it's the duology, and if you guys watch Shadow and Bone on Netflix, it's about the crows. It's about Kaz, Inej, Jesper, Nina, and Mateus. And there's supposedly a Six of Crows spinoff, maybe happening at Netflix. Um, and it would follow this book. Um, and also, if anyone was paying attention during Shadow and Bone, um, all of the title sequences for each of the episodes was different. And there was one episode that referenced all of the crows, because there were five crows sitting on a perch that said Shadow and Bone, and then Matthias was behind barred windows. So, and there was a crow holding a knife for an edge. But anyway, Six of Crows, absolutely fantastic. If anyone thinks that Kaz Brecker is unhinged in season 2, you need to go read this book and the sequel to it, because Kaz Brecker is technically only a teenager, and running the um dregs. And so this is kind of, not to fully spoil season 2 of Shadow and Bone for anyone, but where crows end up at the end of Shadow and Bone season 2 is kind of where Six of Crows picks up. So I would be really happy if Six of Crows became a spin-off and we got to see them actually doing their own thing without the main characters from Shadow and Bone.
Mhm.
Because you also get a lot more of like the interpersonal relationships, and you can see where the writers for the show pulled out some of the pieces for the show. Like in season 1 with Nina and Matthias originally meeting, that's a flashback in Six of Crows. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense as to why I was in the show. Like, that's so cool. Um, But yeah, it's really good. It is a thicker book, so make sure you have time,
Mm-hmm.
but also you're not gonna want to put it down. So just
Okay,
saying.
I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah. So as always on Raving Geeks, we like to end our shows with some geeky recommendations. This can be anything from something in our community that we're geeking out about, or TV shows or books, normal geeky things that we want you guys to check out. We think you guys would like. So, Carter, what recommendations do you have for us this week?
I'm going to recommend The Mandalorian and Silver Bullet since it's conveniently on HBO Max.
Nice. My recommendations are just books. Not everybody is going to like our top three or honorable mentions, or um, you might like the book that we gave a warning about. I don't know. Um, but you can't know what books you like if you're not reading them or at least trying to read them. Um, and I'm also gonna say shout out to graphic novels and comics because I do consider that part of reading and March is Reading Month and books. Um, because you're gathering information and you're just sitting and you are doing something with your mind, but it doesn't always seem like same type of work that you might do for like school or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I highly recommend Six of Crows just because it is a phenomenal book. If Kaz Brecker is your favorite character in Shadow and Bone series, you need to read this book. You also get more Waylon and Jasper. Jasper. I don't like saying his name out loud because it's spelled Jesper, and I always want to say Jasper with an A. It's not Jasper. Um, but I'm also going to recommend New Amsterdam on Netflix as well. It's a medical drama, but I finally started season two. I had started season one when it first came out, got distracted by other things, so I rewatched season one. I'm now on season two. Um, but it's not as dramatic as things like Private Practice or Grey's Anatomy. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually really nice. So yeah, I highly recommend New Amsterdam.
Okay.
All right. So if you guys have any book recommendations for us, or you want to reach out to us for a question of the week or a topic you want us to discuss, you guys can reach out to us on our Twitter or Facebook. Just search Raving Geeks. And then you can also check out our videos on TikTok. And I'm going to be trying to edit out some more videos from our podcast, put it on our TikTok account as well. And that one is also just searching Raving Geeks, and you'll find us there too.
Mm-hmm.
So as always, I have been Hope Gooderl along with my co-host,
I'm Carter Sally.
and we hope that you guys have a great weeky and that you stay geeky.
See you
See
guys
ya.
later.